The Total Seal booth is rocking here at PRI 2022. Joe Costello, Lake Speed, joined by Mr. Gary Stinnett from Foggit. Gary?
Also a little bit of an NHRA world champion as well.
Right now, Gary is Gary from
Foggit.
Okay. the innovator, the inventor, the guy who solved the problem out there. Yes, he is a 4-time Super Comp world champion and world legendary engine builder,
right,
and friend of Lake.
Well,
but right now he's Gary from Foggit. You tell us, Gary.
Tell you what.
You're Gary from Foggit.
I'm Gary from Foggit.
What is Foggit?
Foggit is a high performance, it's a dedicated, specifically designed high performance fogging oil.
Yeah.
It's designed to go in anything with a cylinder and a piston to keep it from rusting or any kind of oxidation, methanol, gas, whatever.
Right, that's a big thing. Today's fuels make a ton of power because they got a lot of oxygen in them, because you need oxygen to make power.
Define oxygen.
Oxygen, okay, so you have like ethanol, you got methanol, MTBE, you get some ethers, things like that in there. That stuff's corrosive.
Exactly.
And that's the biggest issue, is we got synthetic oils now that have lower friction, which means they're going to run off the parts. There's less cling to them. And you can couple that with more corrosive chemicals in the fuel, because hey, that carburetor can do a great job of atomizing the fuel, but if it doesn't completely vaporize, it can't burn. And if liquid fuel is in your cylinder that has oxygen in it, it's going to cause corrosion.
So what we really have a lot of is sulfuric acid.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have in the oil and in the gas sulfur, parts per million. If you combust sulfur and you have oxygen present, which ignites it, all it needs is the missing ingredient to really set it off, and that's H2O.
Yep.
Which the internal combustion engine produces.
Makes water every cycle.
Right. So every single time the spark plug fires, we are pumping sulfuric acid out the exhaust port, right? It's in the cylinder. That's what rusts the headers. And you know, with your discussion with John Causey about that rust.
Oh, geez, yes.
That rust traveling back upstream into the intake port. So every time you start it, you're getting rust back and forth, right? From the sulfuric acid, rust to the headers. So use stainless headers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But use Foggit.
Yeah.
Because what we do is we neutralize the sulfuric acid. So when you shut the engine off, Foggit and spray it with Foggit, it goes in, it coats the cylinder wall, coats the valve seats, the valves, and hopefully some out in the header.
Yep.
Right? So that whether you store it for 8 hours or 2 weeks or 2 months, we've hopefully protected your cylinder wall.
Well, I know from my dad's engine, it was a cup motor, ran 2002 in vintage racing. It sat for 18 years. When we put it in the dyno, it was down 200 horsepower. And we pulled it apart. You couldn't find anything mechanically wrong with the engine, but the cylinders and the valve seats all had rust because they'd sat for so long. And that was even without oxygenated fuel. That was old 114 leaded race fuel. But that leaded race fuel, like you said, contained sulfur.
So also what happened is, like back in the 70s when my dad raced, they went and got avgas and they put toluene in it to up the octane. Toluene is a dirty, oily, filmy, nasty product. Well, they also ran 2-ring pistons, right? No second ring. The bores were in stock blocks, which didn't stay round. And so it was very normal when we pulled the head off a super stock motor in the late 70s, early 80s, for oil to sheathe down the flat top piston, just run down it. There would be no carbon. It was just oil saturated. So what I like to call is, in the early days, we had self-oilers. We didn't need a fogging oil. They just blew oil all the time. Well, we got aftermarket blocks, bow tie blocks, dark blocks, whatever.
Better rings.
We got much better rings. $2,000 some rings. We got diamond honing, profilometers, vacuum pumps. We've dried out the fuel and all the oil. We took all this detergent we had in the 70s, ran detergent oil. Well, we pulled out those detergents so you could put in more lubrication, friction modifiers. It's like, I was talking to Billy Godbold about this. He had a great analogy. He says, you're taking out football players off the bus to replace them with cheerleaders. You don't want to do that, right? So cheerleader out, football player in. So the problem is that we've dried the engines out. And I mean, it's not unusual now to have 23, 24 inches of vacuum. Then you shut the thing off. And what it does is what I call the reverse iced tea effect.
Yep.
You see a glass of iced tea, no matter where it's at, sweats on the outside.
Yep.
Because it's colder on the inside than it is on the outside.
Right.
When you pull your race car into the trailer, shut it off, and it cools down in the 50s at night or 40s.
Reverse iced tea.
Reverse iced tea. The inside of the cylinder wall is going to sweat and condensate. Yep. That's going to rust. So the beauty of Foggit, if you pull the engine in, shut it off, fog it by turning it over and spraying it down the intake system, now it's protected for that night. It does not foul spark plugs. It does not hurt horsepower. We've dyno proven that, but I'm going to do the story of my Superstock car at Indy this year.
Okay.
I went 10.02.0 on my first run.
All right.
We didn't have another run that day. I fogged it. The next day, I went out and I went 10.019. I fogged it. The next third morning in a row, 10.019. It moved 1,000 CT 3 different days, fogging it each night without touching the spark plugs.
That's huge right there.
It doesn't hurt the performance.
No.
We've got pro stock teams. Rick Waters has dyno tested it back to back and proven by fogging the engine, wait a little while, fire it, make a pull, no power loss. In the past, when guys were using Marvel Mist Royal W40 or any other chemical,
you could kill your engine actually.
You had to change plugs.
Yep.
So they take the plugs out, put warm up plugs in, fog it. The next morning, warm the thing up, pull those out, put the race plugs in. You don't have to do that with Foggit.
Yeah.
That's excellent. All right, so Gary is from Foggit, as you now know.
Yeah.
Let's talk last year at the show. We had a great conversation with you, parted ways, and you had a tough deal. You had to deal with the COVID, but you're back, and you're back at the show. Like, that's got to be the triumphant return of the year.
I got a second chance at life. After 2 failed attempts at getting off the ventilator, which I was on for 9 days, and my lung capacity was diminishing down to like 5%. By the third attempt, they called my wife and said, "You're just going to have to come in. We're going to take him off the ventilator. He's probably not going to make it." They'd already lost 7 in a row. They pulled me off the ventilator, and for a few seconds, I didn't breathe, and heads dropped. They tell me this, and then God restored my life, and I was able to breathe, and everybody got happy. And now the next few days were pretty rough, coming off of fentanyl and propofol, codeine, morphine. You see some crazy things. You don't ever want to see that again. But I made it, and that's been 8 months now. So I'm back. I lost 34 pounds. I don't recommend a COVID diet. That's not a good diet. But I'm back and pretty healthy. My lungs are at 50%. Going up and down these stairs here are tough, but everything else is good.
Well, man, we're happy to see you.
I'm happy to be here.
Great testimony too, right? Because when God says it's not your time, it ain't your time yet.
Correct. Yes, sir.
So what about racing? You did get back on the track this year. You mentioned the Super Stock. We saw you in Super Comp at Indy. Obviously, had some sort of failure. Unfortunately, didn't get to race. But talk a little bit about what you're planning to do in 2023.
I'll be back out with both Super Stock and Super Comp. I'm going to do a few more of the high dollar bracket races. I'm kind of enjoying that a little bit. It removes the pressure of points and crisscrossing the country, and it pays more than an NHRA does. And I really enjoy doing burnouts and wheelies. So it's really fun to double enter in my 6.7 Camaro. You know, runs mid-5s, all steel car, and be able to put in some weekends 37 runs in one weekend.
A lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of practice too, isn't it?
It is. And it actually did enhance my reaction times on the NHRA side.
I thought I remember hearing you say that.
Yeah.
In one of the, maybe it was in horsepower last year or something like that. You mentioned that racing more regularly like that, your bracket racing, made your NHRA racing better.
Yes, sir.
Well, knowing that, and you speak on this, like the big money bracket racing world is as cutthroat as any style of racing. Putting out 6-figure paychecks, everybody brings their A++ game, and if you're going to be 20, you're probably going to go home.
Yeah. It's to the point now where probably if you're not 12 or better on the tree, they need to put an early turn on. And then at the tower, the light does come on with an arrow. You failed. You were 20 on the tree. Just get out of the way.
Is that crazy to think?
That's amazing. But it has transferred over to NHRA.
Yeah.
Because all super stock is much tougher. Bottom bulb guys, stock eliminator, and the super comp guys. And of course, they changed the Christmas tree a year ago in NHRA, giving everybody 30 back on the tree. There's nobody that has any excuse for having a bad light in NHRA today.
Yeah.
So it's tough, And
okay, so a lot of people are probably going to be confused by what you just said because it was one of those changes that, like, you don't publicize that, right? You don't make it a big deal. So can you explain it? It has to do with the going from incandescent bulbs
to LEDs.
The first time.
Okay.
And so, do your best.
See, I'm a drag race novice, so educate me.
So the
I'm curious.
incandescent bulb. Go ahead, Gary.
The incandescent bulbs were, for 40 years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And they came out with LEDs because they were more accurate, and the fuel cards would actually rattle the filaments out of the incandescent bulbs.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So they said, well, let's go to LEDs. The first week they had them, everybody was 30 red. I mean, you just could not get a green light because they come on so fast. You saw them and you left. So they had trouble. No pro stock motorcycle could even turn it green. So they're scratching their heads. So Bob Brockmeyer at CompuLink said, I can fix this by on the system, on the screen, the setup screen, they put in an LED compensation. And there's like a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They would go in there for sportsman, pro tree racing, and pro stock bike racing and put like a number 3 LED compensator, making a 300s delay. You really were no longer on a 4/10 tree, you were on a 370 tree, or vice versa, right?
Okay.
So all of a sudden, everybody there lost reaction time from the LED back more like the incandescent. Well, after however many years, 7, 8, 9, 10 years it's been like that. I don't know why, but they decided this January, February, so you know what, we're going to take that out. That way, everybody can get a light. So, it was a hotly contested topic early on. The people that worked very hard, like myself and many others, to make their car be able to have a 000 reaction time.
Yeah.
Suddenly we were kind of not penalized, but we lost our advantage. The guy or gal that's 30 at best, now they're 000.
Got it.
Yeah.
So
and a lot goes into making a car react, which is where you're an innovator and you can test. There's a lot of things that people do. I think that is a good explanation. And bottom line, though, it's tougher now because more people can have
a good light,
a perfect reaction.
Yeah.
It's mostly in the equipment. You don't even have to have as good a car to have a perfect reaction time. Now, I may not. Winners still win. The cream still rises to the top. Right. So I'm not sitting here being a crybaby because they did that, but it did narrow the field up where the range of reaction times is much tighter.
Got it.
Then the guys that are very good at the finish line and skill, it just made their job that much tighter.
Yeah. That's life, though. That's competition. Yeah, it's always that way, right?
Yeah.
And it is. It's never been tougher, and it's awesome to watch. So what about the show here? Obviously, you got the brand. How's it going so far?
It's been going great. We have a booth. First time I've ever had a booth at PRI.
How about that?
Yeah. I never use this word. I always just hate it's overused, but yesterday I actually had a moment where it was surreal.
Yeah, there you go.
I used the word.
Yes.
But it was surreal because I was like, I went to the first PRI show, not the first one ever. The first one I went to was in Cincinnati in 1994.
Yeah.
Because I helped develop the Superglide case with Dennis Reed.
Okay.
And we debuted it in the Hughes booth that year. And it was a big deal, and I was part of that, the design of that. So then all these other years, I've been out here as a customer vendor, and so to have my own booth 28 years later, is pretty cool. Yeah. And we've had a great turnout over there. A lot of people stop by. Of course, it's such a new product, and we are creating a new market.
Right.
There's been fogging oils, but they're mostly marine. We create a high-performance racing fogging. Now, it works in everything from lawnmowers and chainsaws all the way to Formula One car, but it was specifically designed for the performance industry.
Right.
And so, as we're over there selling that, we got people come by and they go, "What is fogging?" So you have to give the whole explanation.
Right, yeah.
And that's okay. Our first job is creating a market, creating a brand, educating, and awareness. That's what we're here for.
Well, one thing you mentioned earlier I thought was kind of interesting is how many people are starting to use it for machining.
Yes,
because
sir.
That same corrosion protection, when you're cutting a piece of aluminum or cutting a piece of steel, it's now being exposed to the atmosphere for the first time. So it can corrode. By having that anti-corrosion in there, you're actually protecting that surface that you just cut.
But it just turns out, this is the way things happen in the world. We create something, invent something, and it turns out it works great for that.
Unintended consequence.
Yeah. How about Viagra? I don't think they did that.
That was definitely not for that.
So I got guys now calling me every day and telling me about, I used it head porting, grinding aluminum, drilling, tapping, machining, even gun cleaning.
Yeah.
And they're using it, they're finding it. Of course, as men, that's what we like to do. I'm going to take this and I'm
Experiment.
going to see if I can't make it work for that.
Yeah.
And then when it does, it's a hit. So we definitely have a much broader market than I thought we had here.
That's cool.
Very exciting. Gary, thank you very much for
Sure.
joining us here. In
That's
the booth.
why the whole industry, right? That's our industry. That's why we have the PRI show. We show up, we do this kind of stuff, is to find that next little thing to keep iterating, innovating, because that's what makes racing fun.
Yes, it's
the whole shebang, and we're just happy that you're back.
I'm glad to
yeah.
be back. Now, if I come to the expo, you're not going to get me sick again, right?
No, actually, definitely not.
Gary Stinnett with us here, Total Seal booth, PRI 2022.